child doesn't know their potential. It's up to us as educators to help them realize education is about access and opportunity for advancement in our modern society.
Future ready.
21st century learning.
Entrepreneurship in schools.
Problem-based activities.
Standards-based instruction.
Professional learning communities.
So what does it all mean? And how does it translate to creating a pathway that leads to success for every child? What is your role in education?
I'm a communication systems engineer.
I'm a secretary.
I'm a school nurse.
I'm a guidance counselor.
I'm a facilities manager.
I'm a science teacher.
I'm an ESL teacher.
I'm a vice principal.
I am a student.
I am an assistant superintendent.
This is the Family of Global Educators podcast. Join us as we discuss contemporary issues in education, from policy to practice, from learning to leadership and beyond.
2700.
2700.
When a 3-year-old child enters our doors in preschool, we have 2,700 school days to prepare them for their future. Let's make every day count. Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Salvatore, Superintendent of Schools, and I'm here with Long Branch Personnel Manager Elisa Aquino.
Hi, everyone.
Today, we are going to review a first read for approximately 25 policy that are coming up. And we're going to start with everything from some minor word changes all the way to options and then items up for full discussion that you can review. So why don't we start off, Elisa, with some of our minor policy changes that kind of cover a broad amount of topics.
So some of our minor changes have been the evaluation of the superintendent for both policy and regulation.
And basically what that is, there's a new instrument that will be coming out through New Jersey School Board that can be utilized, and it's aligned to the professional standards for ed leadership. And then the board would have the option to utilize that as long as I'm in agreement with it. And then also that the superintendent must be evaluated annually, as I am.
Another one would be the expulsion policy 5620, and also school closings is another example, policy 7130, and these are just minor word changes.
So give me an example of what a minor word change would be in a policy.
Instead of written performance report, it now says annual performance report.
You also would see some minor changes, like instead of using the word pupil, they would use the word student. So that's when we say minor changes, we really are talking about some minor changes. So if we move on to some of the other policies that actually have some options, and these are options that are recommended by our policy company, it gives us the board committee, and it gives you all the options to select certain things that might be more specific to our student population or to our teachers. So the first one starts with suspension. We talked about this in committee last week. So what were some of the options in terms of suspension?
The options in terms of suspension were for the board members actually to be involved in the suspension of a student, or for the superintendent to actually be involved with the suspension of a student. So there was discussion amongst that.
Right, I remember this. So we were kind of trying to guide this conversation, and it went really well. Because frankly, the board members don't want to have anything to do with suspension, nor do you probably as school administrators or teachers. But the reality is it happens. And this really is an option for when a parent is appealing a suspension. What would be the board's involvement? In the situation where a parent came to a board meeting and publicly stated that they wanted intervention and they wanted consequences to be lifted or changed or removed, what would the board then do? So they chose an option, and this is up for first read, that they would have a select committee that would work along with the school administration and superintendent to review the matter. The last piece to the suspension policy really applies to our early childhood learning centers and our elementary schools. And it's a targeted piece for preschoolers through grade 2. And it's very specific, and these are guidelines from the Department of Education, that an out-of-school suspension for a child from preschool to second grade can only occur for 2 reasons. 1, if something was violent in nature. 2, it was sexual in nature. For any other reason, a child should not be suspended out of school. That's through policy and guidelines from the Department of Education.
The next policy would be district sustainability policy.
And you all know sustainability is not going away. It's not just a cliche or buzzword. This is something we're trying to build an entire framework around in the district. So whether it be green teams in the schools or purchasing agents, we are trying to be more sustainable. So what were some of the options there?
Green products were some of the options, coming together with a green team committee as far as them receiving their professional development.
We gave this, it wasn't something that actually was just decided in first read for the committee. It was decided amongst the facilities department and some members of the green team. We gave them the first read, first draft to review, and we said, what options would you like to consider or pursue in the future? And some of those were selected, so please feel free to take a look at those. Those are in policy 7461. We also had a lot of discussion around unpaid meal charges and outstanding food service charges because it seems to be a hot topic. If you recall, probably about a year ago, 2 years ago, a child in a school in New Jersey was denied a school lunch, and another child in another district was given a cheese sandwich. That was in our district, but we have done that before. So it is a topic that needed to be addressed and adjusted. But one of the things we talked about were the number of kids that are receiving free and reduced lunch, which in Long Branch, that means free lunch for all. So we have about 83% of our kids that receive free or reduced lunch. And since we pick up the balance, then they're all receiving a free lunch. So we only have about 17% of our total population that will pay. And the cost of a full meal for a day is $2. So you get a free breakfast and a lunch for $2, which isn't a bad deal. But the options were around what our procedures would be for food service in the event there was a balance or arrears that were built up. So Elisa, can you share some of those options?
So the option that we discussed was actually option 3, which is basically breakfast and lunch would be served, but lunch would be served after the second notice. We would actually feed the children for about 2 weeks if it's unpaid bill, and then we would actually give them an alternate meal after 10 meals.
Right, and we're doing something similar now. So we allow them to build up an arrears of almost about $20, and then we would provide the alternate meal. So this is how it would work in food service. They would be monitoring it. They would be informing the parents of it. And remember, this is only for those who are designated as paying in full. And each child would receive their typical hot lunch for up to 2 weeks. So it's going to be 10 sessions that are outlined in the policy. After that, they would get an alternative meal. So it may not be the same hot meal, and we would include that for the rest of the duration. Hopefully it didn't go on too long, and we were able to intervene properly and kind of claim some of those funds back. But the goal is to make sure every child eats every single day. And it may not be exactly what they chose to eat, but they certainly would be provided with a meal. The next one we had was the local wellness policy and nutrient standards for meals and other foods. What options were discussed?
Option number 4, which was to let parents send in food to the schools as long as the administrator approved them. And they were healthy snacks and meals, and that they met everybody's allergy concerns. Right.
So this is a big concern for parents who want to send in goodies and treats for Halloween, for birthday parties, for any other celebration. You know, instead of having to turn them away at the door, they just simply need permission from the principal, and they have to make a conscientious effort to ensure that it's nutritious. So bringing in bags of candy might not be the best choice, but certainly some cupcakes with the right ingredients would be a more nutritious option. What was up for major discussion actually took quite some time to talk about these items. There were 5 policies from the board website to the evaluation of teachers to bed bugs in schools to educational adequacy of capital projects, and then our long-range facility planning. So, Elisa, you want to talk about policy 1511?
1511, the Board of Education website accessibility. This is basically to make sure that our website is in compliance with the ADA.
Right. So this is something that we haven't done in the past. So we've put up numerous visuals and even videos and text on our webpage. But now there are certain guidelines put out by ADA in order to be compliant. There's even a web check page where you can enter your district URL in there, and it will tell you all the errors and all the styles and fonts that need to be updated or changed. I believe it comes at a good time because we've been talking about updating our district webpage for quite some time. This will allow us to kind of address it, adjust it, modify it so that everybody is comfortable with it, but also so that it's fully compliant with ADA regulations. We actually, the webpage is called webaim.org. So we actually put ours in there and we saw we had more than 14 errors, 27 errors for URLs, and it's time to make some adjustment. The next policy we talked about was 3221, everybody's favorite, the evaluation of teachers. What were some of the discussion topics?
So some of the topics were date changes as far as being on a cap. There was also changes in regards to SGOs and receiving standardized test scores.
Yeah, so this is a change for everybody. So we would receive standardized test scores. We typically would sift through them. We'd upload it into our district data warehouse, which would be Linkit, and they would do a great job to desegregate according to subgroup or according to content area. But this policy is really about putting the data in the teacher's hands, which because we have a robust data warehouse, we're able to do that. We just have to ensure that every child who took an assessment, their results are provided to their next year teacher. So in order to do so, we just have to develop some regulations around that. And we have to abide by a specific number of days that they would receive it. It does make a lot of sense though, right? So if you're getting data in, especially big data from standardized tests, it makes sense that it's in the hands of the people that are teaching them pretty quickly. Okay, the next policy, what is it?
Bed bugs. It's new. It's basically a protocol for administration, school nurses, parents, and it just pretty much walks you through all the steps you need to take if you found a bed bug on a child versus finding a bed bug in the actual classroom.
So there are differences, which if you read policy 7424, you'll learn about those. So the differences are minor. If a bed bug is on a child, then you can do specific intervention with that child, with the school nurse. If the bed bug is not on a specific child, and if it's found in the room, the intervention is more widespread, obviously, that it involves having a third party come into the room. It involves full notification. So there are differences. We really need you to read those because this is something that we certainly have to follow. And it does involve our local Board of Health as well as our district head nurse in this process as well. So moving on from bed bugs, now that you're all scratching, policy 7100, our long-range facility planning. So we talked pretty much in length about this too, because it is a 5-year live window where you're forecasting out some of the changes that need to take place, from minor boiler changes to major adjustments with our facilities, or even to building a new facility. So that can certainly change from year to year, depending upon wear and tear, depending upon your district needs, also depending upon enrollment. So as you're planning for the future, we're planning for the future, we have to ensure that every project we are doing has a projected enrollment so that the Department of Education can see the need that is there. Okay, so there were a couple of hot topics out there that were for policy revisions, but they were pulled back because there's still needs to be a lot of discussion around the topic. And the one is the transgender students. And what policy number is that, Elisa?
5756.
So if you could just read the statement that's out there. This is not for policy revision yet, but we will be seeing a policy probably within the next term. So if you could read the first segment there.
Requirement that a school district ensure a transgender student is addressed at school by the name and pronoun preferred by the student that corresponds to the student's gender identity, regardless of whether a legal name change or a change in official school records has occurred.
So this is controversial too in itself. So because there's no formality to it. And this is why it's up for discussion and not policy change, because there really aren't regulations for a child on changing their identity. So there's no length of time. There's what happens if a child chooses to go back to the original identity, gender identity. So there's a lot of questions out there. But there's also another segment that was equally as confusing, which tells us we need more time to talk about this topic. And what was that?
The new law only requires the commissioner's guidelines to prohibit a school district from requiring a transgender student from using a restroom or locker room that conflicts with the student's gender identity.
So there's a new law by the Commissioner of Education that provides guidelines that prohibits districts from allowing children to use bathrooms according to their gender identity. So there's new law with guidelines by the commissioner, but now there's a second piece to it. Can you read that?
However, the new law does not indicate if a school district is required to permit a transgender student to use the restroom or locker room of the student's choice.
So you can see there why that would cause confusion. In one sense, there are guidelines for prohibiting a district from allowing a child to use it, and on the other end, it's not saying that you're required. So we are going to continue to watch this and look at it as it unfolds throughout the next term. And then if a policy change is needed, which certainly it will be, we will put it out for a first read.
Next topic had to do with the EDTPA, performance-based assessment.
So you may have heard that student teaching is changing, specifically in New Jersey. And it is changing from the traditional route, which many of us have gone through, where you have a full semester, where you slowly work into teaching a few of the subjects or maybe all of the subjects before the end of the semester. The colleges have caught on that that's probably not the greatest practice. And let's be honest, if you can watch a full year unfold with the same group of children and same procedures, you're going to be better prepared to enter the workforce. So instead of doing an arbitrary sophomore field experience and then a junior practicum, you'll be doing a full year of student teaching. So you'll watch as the opening procedures unfold, you'll watch and develop relationships with the children, and then you'll eventually take over the classroom and leave at the end of the second semester. Although it seems up front, it's controversial because there's been conversations about equity, because leaving your job for a semester is one thing, leaving it for a full year without income is another thing. There's also been discussions of student privacy, which I think are critical. So this process requires that the student teacher videotapes their performance. And then the videotape is used through a platform that they're evaluated by. Now, here's where it comes. It's Pearson who controls all the data with this. So the upload is into a Pearson database of the video, and then there is a rubric that Pearson will use to identify effectiveness or efficiency. And that in itself is controversial because you have one side saying, where's the privacy for students? The other side is saying, it's a great practice. Why are we knocking it? Even professional sports have used video for advancement. Why wouldn't educators? Obviously, we're going to find a middle ground, and it will be in a policy probably in the next term or so. And as that develops, we will put more information out to you. Okay, is that it?
That's it.
All right, that's been a lot. So like I said, we reviewed 25 policies, 3 options, and from minor revisions all the way to big changes in regulations. So we look forward to getting any of your feedback on these policies over the next month. We'll go out for a second read at our next Board of Education meeting in November, and we'll finalize those then. So if you have any input, please feel free to share them with Elisa Aquino. You have her email if you are in district, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you, everybody.